these drugs are being sourced from the society. They are being sold in the society. They are being consumed by society members, and the merchants are society members. So the problem and the solution lies on the people.
You find people, who are angry, people who are anxious, people who are depressed, who, in order for them to maintain sanity, have to resort to these substances to keep them going. Now, the tragedy is that initially they feel that they will have control. I'll always stop whenever I want, but it takes its toll because the body now begins to get used to this substance and begins, to have need of it. And so the individual does not use it for personal volition. He now uses it because he has to use it in order to feel well.
There's one girl that I like when I was in secondary school, and I'm afraid to talk to her. Then they saw my friend that is using drugs. Then he advised me that if I take it, I'll be comfortable so that I can talk to her.
So I decided to try it, and then I tried this codeine syrup. It was cough and cold. And then I took this bike home. Then I was like swinging yet. Yeah. So I was like, so this is how it feels. And then on and on and on and on.
The teenage age in life, there are some things that, you would like to experience, something like an adventure. So I wouldn't say I got into drugs because of this. Let me just say curiosity.
In Nigeria as a whole, people use all sort of drugs, that you could think of. You could mention from the cocaine to the heroin. And of course, if you're asking most common drugs that is used here, they are actually prescription drugs. From the tramadol, the opiate-based prescription drugs, like tramadol, like Benylin with codeine, there are so much use within these places. They also use other drugs like the benzodiazepines, like Rohypnol. And of course, they also use a whole lot of cannabis, which is a marijuana. So these kinds of drugs are used. Incidentally, there are, drug use depends on the area of the country. For example, if you go to Jos, for example, they drink a whole lot of alcohol and they brew a whole lot of alcohol. If you go to the Niger Delta region, they brew a whole lot of alcohol and all that. I'm sure you must have heard the news where about 20-something people just died within a period of 1 week because of the alcohol that was brewed. And this is because it wasn't properly regulated kind of alcohol. So, drug use depends on region. And if you get to some other places, people use a whole lot of other things. I've been to Maiduguri, and I was taken to a place to see kids using drugs. And I was taken to this very old building. It's a government building, abandoned building. And then you see kids who come around there. They use very long brooms to sweep the ceiling And as the ceiling dust is falling down, they will be inhaling it until they collapse. You know, of course, they're inhaling the paint from the ceiling, you know, and then you get into another place and you see them soaking old newspapers. They'll soak it in water for maybe like 2, 3, 4 days. And of course, there are so many other unconventional things that I'm sure many people must have told you, like, you know, people sniffing the gutter and so on and so forth, which is the ammonia in it and all that. The idea is just the drive for the high, you know. So in other words, people who really want to get high would get high on anything, you know, that they could lay their hand on. Even though there are some of the things that they're using that we don't know the physiological connection with actually getting high. So sometimes we think that is this simply just a psychological high, because people just smoke whatever it is once they want to get high. That tells you the real thing about dependence or addiction to a drug. Yeah.
Well, different people go for drugs for different reasons. Some will tell you it's unemployment, they don't have work to do, and an ideal man is a devil workshop. Some, they will tell you, and you see it vividly, you see it as a result of your interaction with them. Some, it is family disintegration. Papa and mama are no more together, so that role, of parental role, is not there. They will also tell you, and agree with this reason, availability. You can't take something that is not available. And this is where we come in, especially those ones that we are concerned with. Then also, they will also tell you, part of the reason why they enter this is friends, peer group. And they have bad company, they have bad friends. Also, some will also tell you they do it because they want to imitate certain heroes, models. Like you see young guys, Rasta, Rastafarian, I love Bob Marley, or you see the T-shirt, and this is. Some of these adverts you see also contribute a lot. They will tell you that. For example, if you are used to, like this advert you see, Shine Bobo, they will paint it so, looking so good at this, and some will be tempted to, let me try and see how it goes. Then environmentalism. There are people that live very close to where they have these areas they don't dismantle, where they have gang areas. You'll hear people saying, if you live in ghetto, likely this is the way you'll be brought up. If you are aware of the Ajegules address, you can see the way some of the young guys come in. So there are a lot of reasons they reduce to it.
I remember it was in secondary school. I was in SS1. I tried to fit in with the cool kids. You know, I remember the first time, my first experience with weed. I actually didn't smoke it, I sniffed it in school because, you know, I was in a strict school, and, you know, the guy that brought it, we couldn't roll it and smoke it, so we now mashed it, you know, and sniffed it, and everybody was just feeling high. And I remember being overly excited that day, and from then, you know, because of the experience I had with it and the person that gave me, if we had a party then, you know, I'll be looking forward to going to the party, because the guy will be like, if you come to the party, I'm going to get some weed for us to smoke. And the first time I actually smoked it was at a party, and I remember the sky going red that day. And I told myself, like, this is the shit, and, you know, all my worries just disappeared. Coupled with the fact that back then, that was the same year I lost my dad, and, you know, I couldn't handle, you know, I don't know, but that was when I started getting high.
It's not like I had any major personal, you know, problems. Like you hear a lot of people say, I started using drugs because I had to fill this void, or I had somebody passed, or something bad happened to me. I wanted to numb the pain. That wasn't the case for me. It was just watching people do it. And I was curious. What's so special about this? And initially, I was one of those people like, never. I'm never going to do that, you know. But I continued growing up, and I mean, university, that's a bigger crowd. Like that's an even larger audience to get influenced by. And it caught up with me. One day, I just had a stick of marijuana. And from there, it became 2. And like that, it became an addiction. I just realized that, from time to time, I really felt like it wasn't a problem, like it wasn't an addiction. Like, oh, I just do it for the fun. But I realized that there'll be times when I need to do something and I feel like I can't function if I haven't had that high. If I haven't got enough, if I haven't taken something to make me feel like I was doing okay. And that was it for me.
I start with cigarettes. Somebody is smoking it in public every day, is my neighbor. So whenever he dropped the filter, sometimes I used to come and smoke it. By then, I start drug with this. Then from there, I been to the weed, from weed to codeine, from codeine to tramadol, from tramadol to refinol 542, that's blue. That's how I started. From there, I become highly addicted to some of big friends. I become bigger boy. So big men, sons, they used to come, we used to hang out together. So they introduced me to crack. That's another part of drugs that is highly addicted than any drugs in the world, crack. So that's how I started. I do crack for 2 years, I cry. I sell all my, including my bend down, I sell everything. Even my dictionary, I used to read, I sell it. Due to addiction.
I started using drugs as early as 16, and the reason, basically, to summarize it, I'll say is out of peer pressure, to fit into peer groups, you understand, and also to have a sense of maturity and control.
I got drugs when I gave birth to my second child, because I had this serious abdominal cramp. So a lady near me suggested that I take spirit, that it does work. So after taking it, and after the baby was growing up, I still got dependent on that spirit, and I had to be brought here to be rehabilitated. I came here, this is my second time of being here. First I came because I used to consume alcohol, spirit. But after I left again, I had a minor accident at my place of work when going to the work, and I was given this injection, pentazocine, and I again substituted it with the alcohol.
I started indulging in drugs while I was in Bingham University. I was introduced to a classmate of mine. So gradually it became an habit of me going to smoke, and I derived pleasure from smoking. There's no any other reason, as in I was influenced by peers.
In terms of drugs, getting exposed to drugs starts from my childhood, of course, but nobody gave me to use. But I know that the man that brought me up smoked cigarettes. He drink beer, you understand? Then he normally asked me to go and buy them for him. Whenever he asked me to go and buy it, he would say I should not touch it, I should not, he don't want me to have a taste of it. Then as a child, I started getting worried. What is in this thing that this man is hiding from me? So there was a day, when he finished smoking, the boot that he threw away, I secretly went to pick that boot and then I smoked it. It dazed me, I fell down. But after some time, that thing seems to give me a kind of pleasure.
I started in secondary school when I was in SS2. That was 2004. Okay, my best friend's older brother was on drugs before I started. So he usually sent us to the pharmacy to get them for him. Of course, they wouldn't sell drugs to him. So, we just wanted to try it, my friend and I. So that was how we started. From then, also in school, my classmates were, some of them were in drugs. And I was I wanted to feel among. So I was experimenting and I was curious.
We're getting to SS2, just a year to finish our O level, one of us introduced this tablet they called D5, Valium 5. So we're developing another pleasure from that one, then we start taking it. We start taking it from 1 tablet to 2, from 2 to 3.
Well, addiction is a brain disease, first of all. And like every other disease that people are affected with, it occurs in degrees, and the causes are varied. With addiction as a disease, we know that at the root cause there's a genetic component. There's also environmental components, social components, if you will. But the summary of the fact is that addiction is a brain disease, and people who have this brain disease typically require treatment and are capable of recovery and living a normal life.
The physiological makeup of an individual can determine how quickly one can get intoxicated to drugs. However, everyone can become dependent on a drug, irrespective of the physiological makeup. I'll give you a typical example. The physiological makeup of individual determines, for example, how quickly one can get drunk on alcohol. For example, if a man and a woman who have never drunk before starts drinking at the same time, sitting down on the table, the woman will get drunk a lot faster than the man. And that is because of the physiological makeup of the woman. The fat distribution in the woman very different from that of a man. The metabolic rate of a man is different from that of a woman and all that. The muscle distribution is quite different. So all these things play a huge role in determining how soon one can get intoxicated or the effect of the drug, on an individual. However, every individual can get dependent on a drug, irrespective of the physiological makeup of that individual. And so a lot of factors may come in to determine how soon that happens. But ultimately, every individual can get dependent on a drug if they keep using that drug consistently. Because the way the drug does is that it reacts in the brain. It changes the way the receptors behave in the brain, especially in the pleasure centers, changes the way the cells are adapting. And so there's a variation in the adaptation of the cells within the brain. And so all this come together and make someone become dependent. And why do we say that someone is dependent? We say that when all the person's activities geared toward either getting the drug that he wants to use or recovering from the effect of the drug and all that. And it takes primacy over every other activity. And that is because of the pleasure that it gives. And the pleasure is, varies with the individual drugs. And that pleasure is what drives the person. And when the person doesn't take the drug again, there is what we call craving. The person would be looking for the drug. You could see them, they could be restless and so on and so on. All they're thinking about is how to get the drugs by all means and all that. So every person could become dependent on a drug if they take the drug for long enough time and in high enough a dose for an extended period of time. They could get dependent on a drug.
Getting to 300 level in university now, I was still smoking. Then a guy introduced the use of Indian hemp again. That was how we kept maturing in the use of illicit drug, So we took this one. What actually made me to have a taste of that Indian hemp is that they said if one take Indian hemp, it can turn your head, you can go crazy, you can do this and that. So, and the kind of person I am, I like to put things into practice to see, to know whether this thing, whether it is actually doing what people say it used to do. So that day, I just took some of it, the dried ones. I didn't smoke it. So I just put it in my mouth and started chewing it. I chewed it. We were in a party in the night. I chewed it. Then after 30 minutes, I discovered that my body chemistry is no longer the same. So without telling any of them, my friends, I left the party and I came home alone. I walked all the way from about 2 kilometers away from my house. I walked it up to my house. Then I slept. This thing was in my body for more than 3 days. You know, I was feeling the effects. And then my eyes, people that were looking at me said my eyes were like as if I was just waking up from bed every time.
Yeah, there are actually several ways of classifying drugs, but if we take the classification system that you've just mentioned as stimulants, depressants, and hallucinogens. Now, these drugs are being classified on the basis of the way they act on the central nervous system. So when we say a drug is a stimulant, we're referring to a drug that excites the central nervous system, stimulates the central nervous system. So for example, you see long-distance drivers who take drugs that stimulate the central nervous system, like if they take the amphetamines, for example. They take things like coffee, they take things like cola and all that. Now, this keeps them awake for a very long time. And that's also what students will likely take so that they will stay awake to read. So you stimulate the central nervous system. When we talk about drugs that are depressants, that means they slow down the central nervous system. They depress the central nervous system. And so you have drugs like the opioids, for example, that depresses the central nervous system. Something like alcohol that depresses the central nervous system, and it distorts the reaction time of people. And then if you talk about drugs like hallucinogens, they alter perception within the central nervous system. And so you talk about drugs like mushroom, drugs like cannabis, for example. These are hallucinogens. For example, when you take them, you may have distortions like hearing voices that you do not, of people you don't see, seeing things that does not exist, and so on. And of course, people use this kind of drugs in religious rituals and so on and so forth. So this classification is on the basis of how these drugs act on the central nervous system. And of course, drugs can be also classified on whether they are legal or illegal, classified by virtue of their, chemical components, classified as to whether they are synthetic or natural or semi-synthetic, and so on and so forth.
Definitely felt like your brain was more open. It definitely felt like, oh, I'm seeing things in a better light. Oh, is that a butterfly? It looks so nice. I mean, the colors are so bright. Everything looks better. Everything is, just more colorful. Yeah. The music is louder in your head. I mean, the lyrics are clearer. You feel like, I'm just feeling this inside of my soul. Like, what could possibly feel so nice? So at that time, you just feel like everything is so much better while you are high on that substance. It took it dawning on me to realize that I actually abused this substance to perform better, or, so to say, make me feel like I was doing better at the time.
Well, opioids are drugs. They act in specific centers of the brain. Oftentimes, that they act in different centers. Some of it could be to possibly maybe reduce pain, and sometimes they act on the pleasure centers in the brain. So they give people a sense of euphoria, and that's actually why people, abuse drugs of that nature, because of the euphoria that it gives to them.
Well, life in general, the way I used to view life then was quite different. I couldn't enjoy life without getting high. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is, even if I don't have cigarettes, is smoke my weed. After my weed, I proceed to, as that day goes, I proceed to look for my rochi. And after my rochi, there was one time I even believed that my day could not go well if I have something coming up. If I have to meet a target or I have to do something, if I don't get high, it won't go well. That was my mentality. If I don't get high, nothing goes well. So I actually lived to use drugs. I didn't know how to live without them. They were actually fun to do.
While I indulge in smoking Arizona, I get euphoria, and my dopamine is always craving for it. So I always try my try as much as possible to get those drugs in all costs. The things I thought I enjoyed while using drugs was the company I keep. As in, I thought that is the most lively company I could ever have without using drugs. So I think, and the euphoria also.
I use drugs because it boosted my confidence. That was, I think, that was the main thing. You get the boost in confidence. You can face anybody, you can challenge anyone. Yeah.
I used cannabis, that's weed. I used alcohol, I used crack cocaine, I used codeine, and I used Refnol.
I'm into codeine, and I take Refnol, and I take Loud Arizona. Loud and Arizona is an upgraded version of skunk.
I started with cannabis, then cough syrup, switched to tablets, and later when I started doing cocaine, heroin, meth, ecstasy, and alcohol.
I never thought that breaking it off was going to be a problem for me. I just thought it's something that you can just start, and then if you want to do with it, you can do away with it.
When I started using drugs, I never thought it will be of any damage or harmful to me.
Before I started using drugs, I never thought it would become a problem.
What are some of the things that I feel like I lost while I was doing drugs? I would say my identity, number one. Secondly, I would say valuable, relationship.
I lost my self-dignity as a human being. I lost my life. Like I never completed school. I lost education. I lost money. My business is folded up real quick. I lost my wife.
Well, the other things here, this drug has caused me is, as a nurse, I'm supposed to be at the last ranking of nursing, a chief nursing officer, but today I'm just a nursing sister who is below my position the way I was supposed to be. Even my juniors are ahead of me because I didn't have time to go for interviews, for promotion exams, because I was dead drunk. So I think that caused me a lot of it, and even family issues.
I was shortlisted for the Nigerian Navy. I couldn't make it because I was tested for substance abuse, and they found that I'm into substance abuse and other things, financial, as in my money, I hardly save.
I've been to 4 universities, yet I have not graduated yet. Yeah, financial, financial implications and all.
I lost closeness with my loved ones, people that are very, very necessary in my life. You understand? They either run away from me or I run away from them because I don't want them to come and start talking to me about the use of the drug. The use of drug also made me to marry a woman that is not my wife. And at the end of the day, I regretted it.
Drug problems is not a willpower problem. I think we should just state that very clearly from the outset. It's not true that you just tell someone, just say no to drug. And that is why I told you that the concept of the sensitization program that says say no to drug doesn't really make sense at all, in any way at all. Because if people could say no to drugs, then there are so many things that they do that they would never do. I give you a typical example. I went to one of the West African countries, and I was taken to where they do take drugs, to interact with the guys. And I was watching the guys shooting. I mean, that's injecting themselves and all that. And then you see someone who has money, he buys heroin, he injects himself with heroin, and then within about maybe 1-2 minutes, he withdraws about 10 mils of his blood, and then he sells 5 mils to people, he injects them, and then they take it, and then when they urinate into a bottle and then share it among themselves and drink to get high. Now, I have managed a patient who was going to sell his blood to use drugs. You know, he was using cocaine. So he was selling his blood, and then he would take the money to go and use cocaine because, nobody wanted to give him money any longer, so he had to sell his blood. And when he was brought in for treatment, he had to be sent to Federal Medical Center. That was in Abeokuta. And he was transfused with, 4 pints of blood over a period of 3 weeks before he was sent back for the drug treatment. Now, the point I'm trying to raise is that when I see people who are well accomplished, like doctors, like politicians and all that, break down with substance use problem and they have to be treated, even medical doctors, and they bring them to me for treatment, nobody who has the capacity to say no to drug would allow himself to be dragged that low. So addiction is never a willpower problem. It is not a moral problem, where you say that when you know what is good, you don't use drugs, and when you don't know what is good, you use drugs, and so on.
Most of these victims you see of drug abuse don't even know what they are doing. They don't even know they are doing something that is harmful to them.
I'm a nurse, like I said, so it was prescribed by one of our doctors who really didn't know about my addiction problem. So after being in the hospital for 2 days, I was discharged because it was just not, just the backache I had. Then when I came home, I started buying some. I thought it was just a joke, but I found that I was so dependent on that drug. Even without the pain again, I just need to give it to myself.
The opioid painkillers, they're actually looked at as narcotic, medications, and they are possibly one of the best medications to deal with the issue of pain. And that's why people who have, for example, cancer and the rest, they would often give them opioid-based medication, which deals effectively with the pains that they have.
I would want to say that before now, everyone has been working with the best intentions, but the best intentions, are they really evidence-based practices? Are they things that have been tested? Are they things that have been proven? Yes, people work with gut feelings. Oh, I feel that this is what it should be. I feel that if this child is confined, then he will stop all this. I feel that if I take away all the money this child has, he will learn a lesson. I feel that if I expel this child from school, he will know that what he did was a very grievous crime. This is what people have been doing because this is what they think is the best to do. There is this incident of a child who was in senior secondary school, 16-year-old, very brilliant, very intelligent, but the parents caught him with Indian men. And so they felt this was an embarrassment to the family. And so they locked him up in the house for 10 years. And by the time they brought him out, he was already having mental issues. I
have seen someone that had been treated in a facility where he was sent in for 8 months, and he said he was not interested in being treated. He wasn't interested, he doesn't want to be treated. And the mother said, okay, you'll be there until you're interested in being treated. He said, okay. He stayed there. All the money that they gave to him there for his pocket money and all that, the young man refused to spend it. He said no, that he's just keeping his money and all that. And when he was released after 8 months, he left the facility and went straight to a joint and threw a party. The point I'm trying to make is that locking up someone for 1 billion years doesn't deal with the issue of addiction. Now, I would prefer not to talk about addiction as a disease that is being cured. I prefer to talk about addiction as the possibility of someone being in recovery, just like hypertension, just like diabetes. Oftentimes, we don't use the word cure for them, but people could be in remission. Someone could have hypertension and his blood pressure is controlled because he's always on his medication. Someone could have diabetes and is controlling the blood sugar by virtue of his diet and possibly with medication and all that. Someone could have become dependent or addicted to a drug and is keeping that in, and it remains in recovery by virtue of the kind of activities that it carries out, by virtue of the possibility of him joining groups like the mutual help groups like Narcotic Anonymous and all that, by virtue of keeping up with his counseling and all that, by virtue of keeping up with his sponsor and all that. So it's possible for people who have been addicted to drugs to remain in recovery and do very well.
So more broadly, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has the mandate in relation to the 3 drug control conventions of the United Nations, and we are charged with ensuring that countries that are ratified to those conventions comply with them. Nigeria is actually signed up and ratified in relation to those 3 drug control conventions. My role here at the moment is in relation to a European Union funded project that started in 2013 and implemented by the UNODC. It's called Response to Drugs and Related Organised Crime in Nigeria. It's a very broad project and large scale in its scope, and it looks at drug control through a very balanced approach. When we say balanced approach, we're looking at giving equal attention and emphasis and focus to drug demand reduction, so trying to stop the demand for drugs, and also supply reduction, so in relation to law enforcement responses. So we're making sure that this project is designed, which is in line with the international settings in relation to drug control at the moment, is that it should be a balance between both settings. And in the past, you may be aware that there was more of a law enforcement focus. Over the past many years, it's come back to a more balanced approach, and it realises that both approaches need to complement each other. The project, as I said, is funded by the European Union, and it was by 34.5 million euros it's been funded, commenced in 2013 and is set to run until the end of 2019.
I've been through rehabilitation 3 times, and it's every time, the first time was an eye-opener for me, and the first time they forced me there anyway, but the second time I was the one that told them that I needed help and I needed to go to an institution. And when I came out, I relapsed, and that was the final time. The third time was like the final time I was the one that came up with the idea to tell my family that this third time I think I really need help and I need to stay longer in the institution. Because the second time I stayed for a month. The first time I stayed for 3 months and I was clean for a while. Then the third time I just had to say, you know what, like I need help, and I came to an institution.
I think we also need to first take a step back and understand relapse. The goal of treatment is not to never have relapse. That's not a realistic goal. And I say that because the nature of the disease we're talking about is relapsing and remitting. Okay, so a person in recovery from addiction will have periods of relapse, and they would have periods of remittance, so whatever the symptoms of this disease are not present. Now, recovery is such that these are managed in such a way that the person can live as close to normal a life as possible. Now, to put it in context, think about diabetes. Now, when people have diabetes, they take medications to control the initial problem, their sugar level. And when that's settled, they need to implement lifestyle changes like good diet, exercise, and all of that to help make sure that they don't get to the point where they would need to spike their medication or be hospitalized. But if you know anyone who has diabetes, you would know that they would have to be hospitalized several times, mainly because the question of making lifestyle changes is not easy for anyone. I don't know if you've ever tried a diet or tried to exercise or tried to, any new lifestyle habit. It's not the easiest of things for people to put into context. However, what you're looking for is you want the person who has this disease of addiction to understand the disease they have, to understand what the course of this disease is, to understand how they would need to be in the driver's seat with regards to a process of recovery. And so when a person leaves a center such as this, if they are faced with a situation where they end up using drugs or gambling or doing something that may trigger another incident, what we want is that person to be able to immediately respond in a manner that is positive.
We don't want a situation where someone hides it and gets to a point where they need to be rehospitalized. There are things that a person can do on their own. There are instances where they could reach out to counselors and talk and deal with the precipitating issue and just move on with their life, same as everything else. So our goal in terms of management is that the individual understands their disease and is an active participant in the management of their disease, such that even where there are slip-ups, they are also willing and able to bring that under control by reaching out for the necessary help, such that their overall lives are not actually thrown off course because of that.
At what stage did I realize and know that I had to change? It just dawned on me that I was different from the person who I knew growing up. You know, I looked at myself and I knew that you are becoming something else. This is not you. You needing substance to function. This is not you. When you're happy, you feel like you need substance. When you're sad, you feel like you need substance to numb your pain. When you're angry, when you feel empty, you feel like you need substance to fill that void. This is not you. I just realized it was a sudden, moment. It dawned on me that I had changed from the girl that my parents raised. I was no longer the person I used to know as a child. I had become someone else that I didn't understand. And I just sincerely, genuinely wanted to change that. I wanted to be myself again. I wanted to be in control of my own life again.
Everything in my life started going downhill. I found myself, not being satisfied with anything. I was just empty. I was hollow. I could wake up in the morning and I'll start crying. I'll start crying, and maybe the night before, I'll say, man, I'm not doing this thing anymore. All the paraphernalia, I'll throw them away. My Rizlas, my smoking pipe for weed, the next day I'll find myself doing the same thing again, So I got really, really, really tired and frustrated with life. Nothing was going well, and most importantly, I felt like a failure. So I was tired. I was tired of that lifestyle.
Okay, I wanted to quit because I started hallucinating of things that are unimaginable things. So I started seeing things. So my life became unmanageable. So I came here to seek help.
I just thought I've had enough. Okay, I don't know how to put it, but I'm the oldest from my parents. All my younger ones, some university graduates, some are in university, so they've achieved a lot. My friends, the one I've grown up with, they've all achieved a lot, but I'm still where I am. Like, I can't move from a particular phase in my life. I'm stuck. So I just thought maybe I've had enough, I've seen enough. It's time to move on with my life.
The treatment regimen depends a lot on the case that is at hand and the severity of the case that is at hand. For the majority of people, they should be able to have access to counseling following proper assessment. Some people, just counseling may be adequate for them to help them, deal with the issues and all that. For some others, they will require more like an inpatient kind of treatment. But for most persons who are actually dependent on a drug, they would really first require to come in and then have a detox done. Detoxification is to safely help the person withdraw from the drug that he was using, but that does not treat the problem. The people have to withdraw safely from the drug that they are using for them to be engaged in treatment. And so oftentimes people may just do a detox for 2 weeks and they say they're okay. They're not okay because you've not even started treating people at all. I told you earlier that addiction or dependence on a drug changes the brain. Now, studies have shown that it takes more than 3 months or more for people's brain to return back to near normal after they have stopped using drugs. In fact, in the case of alcohol, people have been seen 9 months after still, doing some PET scans and so on and so forth, not returning completely to what it used to be before. The adaptation becomes almost, there is still residue of the adaptation, which may still make the person to crave and possibly go back to drug use. And so they may require more like an intensive kind of treatment where there will be things like cognitive behavioral therapy being used to assist the individuals and all that. Some of them may require some basic life skills, that's to learn these basic life skills, which may include issues of assertiveness, refusal skills, and so on and so forth. And so all these gamut of therapy could be brought to bear for people who have drug use problem. But I think that the most important focus should be in even prevention, which is what it's hardly being done.
The treatment facilities we have in the country are mostly residential, mostly in the capital, mostly in tertiary institutions. And that means, psychiatric hospitals and teaching hospitals. So if I have a problem, and I usually ask it this way, if your cousin has a drug problem, where would you refer him to? You find out for most of us, we will scratch our heads because you're not sure which facilities exist and which ones actually provide evidence-based treatment. So they're limited in terms of availability. If it was malaria, you wouldn't bat an eye, you know where to send the person to, even to the chemist next door. And that's the level we need to get to when it comes to issues with, drug users and their access to treatment. So that alone is limited. Treatment is limited. First, we don't have, the facilities in place. We don't have options outside of the tertiary institutions except these DICs that have just been started by UNODC. You have a few CSOs that are running and doing a great job, but they're basically not funded and limited in terms of location and scope. If we expand and create more treatment facilities, that's great. Next level is to train up practitioners that can actually deliver evidence-based treatment. As you know, there's some treatments that are going on in the country that are not evidence-based, and so that does affect that.
First of all, I would want to limit myself to the 11 model treatment centers. There are other treatment facilities that are really good. In the last couple of years, a lot of private treatment centers have come up. For the many of them, I simply just can't vouch for what happens in those facilities, honestly. For the 11 model treatment centers, which could be a starting point, these 11 model treatment centers are found within the psychiatric facilities that we have in the country. We have about 8 psychiatric facilities in the country, and then we have a couple of university teaching hospitals where their psychiatric department have been upgraded to be a model treatment center. So we have places like here, for example, in Kaduna, we have a neuropsychiatric hospital. We have in Benin, we have in Yaba, for example, we have in Calabar, we have in, some of these places. What I would advise is that is a starting point for parents who are close to those places. What you could do is to say, you go to those places, speak with them. You mustn't be treated in those facilities, and I keep telling people all the time. But when you speak with people, one of the things that we have a responsibility to do as treatment experts is to be able to give people options to make choices from.
There's lots of things that need to be done. The institutions that provide drug treatment services need to be strengthened still. I'm talking about the Federal Ministry of Health, I'm talking about the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and community CSOs need to be strengthened as well to be able to deliver. I think a big part of the solution is low-cost community-based treatment services, expansion of those. High-cost medical hospital-based services are difficult. As I said, they're expensive. There's still stigma associated with accessing them. People can have to move often from their communities. People find it difficult to move from their communities from a range of factors, whereas I think we need to go to where the drug use is happening in the communities. I think that's a big part of the solution, and that's something that we've been pushing for within the project and will continue to expand in relation to community-based drug treatment services.
That time, when I look back at it, if I had known better, I would have done better for myself.
I would have done things differently because there would be this satisfaction that, you know, I lived life the right way.
I would have been more selective on people I associated with while being a child, you know, especially towards the adolescent age and teenage age. I would have been more selective.
I really had a personal encounter, you know, and I had this enlightenment that there's so much more to you. There's so much out there. Like, you can't just be here struggling with something that the Holy Spirit could just help you deal with. And when I realized how much content, you know, I could lay my hands on, how much things I could fill my inner self with, and I started to touch on those things, the Word of God, I started to inquire, started to ask, started to tell people, okay, this is what's going on with me. You know, I started to make new friends, started to, you know, just feel, I mean, I had cut my circle away, but I had nothing else to fill the void. So it was when that emptiness kept coming back at me that I kept going back to use. But now I had something to fill that emptiness, and so I never felt the need to ever go back. And today it's, 5 going on 6 years, and I've been okay.
I miss a lot of things. I cry for help because I'm addicted. My friends put me into the world of codeine, tramadol, and weed, that's Indian hemp. So after I become addicted, they leave me. You understand? So I find the way out by myself, without any doctor. I say I must quit. If I want to follow this way, then my friend is there. I will change this way to another way. That's how I do it. I rehabilitate myself locally. Any drug user, if 6 o'clock p.m. knock, he must go and take something. So by then I make myself busy. I'm selling bend down by then. I'm selling bend down. I will not come home till around that kind 8, 9 when I finish my hustle. Because if I come by 6, most of my friends will influence me. That's why I make myself busy. That is the first thing that I do to get rid of drugs. And the second thing, if I feel of taking codeine, by then in the year 2002, I take tea, hot tea with ginger. So when it makes my body calm, if I feel like taking cigarette, I will use TomTom. So that's how I'm doing it locally, without any doctor. Because by then I don't have money to go and see the doctor.
I thought it was something I could just get done with it. But I found out later that I couldn't just go ahead. It was like driving me into something that I cannot handle. So my husband suggested we come here, and which we did, to help find a cure for.
I attended a Holy Ghost school class. That day, I traveled with my auntie. I forgot I did not take any of the drug with me. I thought I would come back that day. I said I will manage myself. But my auntie did not allow me to come back. She said this class is going to take place for 5 days. And I had to stay for 5 days without taking a drug that I cannot leave. When it starts, when the symptoms occur, I can't manage it for more than 3 hours without taking it. I had to stay for 5 days. So within that 5 days, in fact, a lot of miracles happened. What I expected did not happen. You understand? I thought I was going to die there, but with prayer, that was how I was untied by God from that habit.
Well, if I could take back the hands of time, I don't think my family will be scattered at this, because I will be a dedicated mom and a righteous woman. I don't think I will go into drugs because it's very dangerous, not even for my health. Even the family splits the family, and that's exactly what I'm facing now. So I would do anything to bring back my family again, and also my health condition to be better off than I am now.
I would say to people out there that are still using drugs to try and get help. Because even if they're willing to stop, a lot of times they can't do it on their own. They need to get help. They need to get professional help.
In those days, I don't have even 20 naira to buy clean to wash my clothes. But now this is my company, Junior Red. I become a fashion designer in Kano. My plans now is to rehabilitate 500 youths. I rehabilitate 24 people that are addicted to drug abuse. Now they quit. They are here they are working with me here. I think you can see them.
So to families of people who have a substance use disorder or have a problem with drug addiction or any kind of addiction, the first thing I would say to them is don't panic. It's an illness, and nobody likes to know that someone they care about has an illness. But the truth is there is help. Treatment is available, and people who have these disorders do recover. It's not a death sentence. It is not necessarily as a result of any kind of moral failing, both on the part of the person with the disorder or on their part as parents or family members. But they would need to actually make certain adjustments, both the person with the disorder and their loved ones, in order to accommodate the kinds of lifestyle changes that this person is going to need to make to go into recovery.
The culture of silence isn't helpful in relation to this issue. It needs to be, some of these issues need to be ventilated and discussed in an open forum quite easily. People who have a drug use issue should be able to free to talk about it. They should be able to look for solutions. In terms of Nigeria, there needs to be an avenue where people can talk about this freely. It shouldn't have the stigma associated with it. So it just needs to find a mechanism, and I think that's part of education, part of awareness of the issues. And people, I think, have been scared of drug use, and they've been told that drug use equals criminals, drug use equals terrorism, and all these different badges that come with it. Drug use equals unhealthy people. It's not always the case. There is only a small minority of people that where drug dependency becomes a real issue.
Well, one of the policies we need to change, and I guess that's more policy and legislative, is one that looks at the drug user not so much as a criminal, but as a person that has a health problem and needs attention of a healthcare practitioner. That alone changes many things in terms of how we then interface and interact with a drug user, making that person to see himself more as a person, more as a human being, and more amenable to the help that's being offered. So that's one of the things that needs to change. And once that changes, again, it will affect the level of stigma we have towards drug users in this society. And if that stigma changes, we can then get communities to be more supportive of their recovery effort.
If we were talking about what is the likelihood of this killing the person who is using it, then we should be banning alcohol and tobacco. Every 6 seconds, someone dies as a result of tobacco-related illnesses. So we're not really viewing it from the point of, is it going to kill you? Is it harmful? We're viewing it from a completely different lens, and I'm not sure what that lens is. Now, with alcohol, we say, don't drink and drive. Because it's okay for you to drink, but at the point where you drive, you create a scenario where you could harm yourself or harm other people. But we don't want to talk about, what about other drugs? Is there a way we can minimize the harm that is likely to be caused from using that? Accepting that not everybody who uses those drugs is a criminal, a terrible person, or even dependent on it. The society's focus, or seeming focus, when it comes to drugs has been, it's a war. We're going to make sure that we eradicate drugs entirely and we have a drug-free society. We've been fighting this seeming war for how many tens of 20s of years, and no one has won. I mean, the big winners are the people who deal off of a black market, because it just is not possible. So I think the focus should shift to responsible use and should also include services that are available for people who have disorders related to drug use. That's what I would like to see happen.